Well,
Hey toy fans, Aaron here. Tonight going to take a look at the Retro Collection Grand Moff Tarkin figure, which you can find inside the Star Wars Escape from Death Star board game. It's a Target exclusive, and for the purposes of this review, I'm just going to focus on the figure and not really worry about the board game. So let's head to the table and check this out. Here's a look at Retro Tarkin on that card. And if you want to get your hands on this thing, it is tucked away, as I already mentioned, inside that Escape from Death Star game. Open the game up, and then inside this little white cardboard insert, you will find the carded figure. And that's all there is for protection on it. I think this card itself is pretty well protected. As long as no one pushes down on the front of it, it shouldn't crease the bubble for the figure. But getting back to the carded figure, what they're giving you is some worn edges to the entire card with this white being printed on there to make it look like the black is chipped off. While it's done well and certainly looks beat up, I mean, the first thing my wife said about the board game was, don't you want to find a better looking one? I gotta say that I would have preferred a nice printed card, you know, without those worn edges. Probably doing this to try and differentiate it a bit from the Vintage Collection line, but I think that huge, massive Retro Collection sticker is doing the job of that already. The image that you have of Tarkin is looking great. I think it's a great scene to pull from. And then for that sticker that you see, yes, it indeed is a sticker, and I tried to pull it off. Some of you may have better luck, but for me, in a few parts, it did pull the photo off of the card. It peeled that up a bit. This larger piece of white here that you're seeing is the leftover parts of the sticker that at this point I just didn't bother trying to clean off, because as you can see, the other 3 gray marks, that's the card back that peeled up with the sticker. So if you want to remove yours, proceed with caution. I even went pretty slow with mine, and it just still peeled up. Taking a look at the back side of the card, kind of a mix of new and old here. Certainly the overall look of it does look like what you're getting today. Of course, you got your multiple languages laid out, and you still have the white designed in on the edges of the card to give you that worn look. That upper half is talking about the Retro Collection being inspired by the 70s Star Wars figures. And the images of the figures being shown, or the characters I should say, it's pretty much how it looked on the Vintage line. It wasn't the actual photos of the figures that you were going to get, or photos of the actors themselves, but instead more of a character drawing. In that little thin red area, it does mention the names of the other figures, though, that are going to be available in that Retro Collection line, with that bottom half of the card still maintaining your legal information. And taking a look at Tarkin out of the packaging, I gotta say, man, just holding this vintage-looking action figure that's all bright and shiny new from a packaging just certainly brings back a lot of childhood memories for my other figures. Of course, the point of this line is to provide that retro feel, give you those actual vintage action figures being re-released. And while, like I mentioned, we didn't get him initially in that original line, it's great to have him now, and it looks like they did this figure 40 years ago. Going in for the head sculpt, you know, obviously the original line, they just did not do the realistic sculpts or poses that we're getting today. But it still looks like Tarkin. You can look at this and still feel like, yeah, that is Tarkin. And yet the aesthetics of the figure matches up very well with the original figures. And that's what this one needs to be for me. Painting looks great. Hairline looks great. Painting for the eyes is looking pretty good too, and overall he's got a very nice flesh tone to the coloring of the skin. As for the rest of the figure, of course he's wearing his Imperial uniform, so overall you're getting a very nice gray color. The center portion of his chest has a nice gloss to it, and on the arms, the sleeves of the outfit though, not as glossy. Not necessarily a matte finish, but just not as super glossy as he is on the center of his chest. I don't have many vintage older figures to go by, but for the few that I do have, and in comparing those with this Tarkin figure, they seem to be the same way. More gloss on the chest, not as much for the arms. Otherwise though, through the arms, through the center of the chest, you are getting some subtle wrinkles in there for the fabric or for the uniform. That red and blue painting for the ranking symbols on his chest looks pretty good. You can see you got some of those command code sticks sculpted in there also. As far as the back of the figure, again, some subtle wrinkling in there, but otherwise things are pretty smooth. On the top of that uniform, just below his neck, I do have an odd little glitter thing stuck on there. Not sure what that's about, but that's probably something that's rather unique to this figure, I'm guessing. Otherwise, carrying on through the rest of the uniform's got a very nice belt painted in there. Black painting is looking pretty good. Nice little white buckle painted in there. It's a pretty tight paint job overall. It's not blending out past the belt or anything like that. And carrying on down for the rest of the legs, it looks like, well, nice gray pants. They do flare out off to the sides as you're used to seeing on the Imperial uniforms. Still some nice subtle wrinkles sculpted in there. On the back of the left leg, you still have the raised copyright stamp for Lucasfilm. Hasbro, made in China, or it just says China. But on the back of the right leg really is your only touch of modern influence for this figure, and that is where you have printed there. I guess it's a product stamp of some sorts. And then the boots for the figure looking pretty good. Nice matte black coloring. As for articulation, no surprises here. That head does swivel all the way around. Both arms also swivel all the way around. Legs come straight out. And because of the way his coat is done for this particular figure, they don't really go back. It's pretty much just straight down. Figure does come with a single accessory, and that is a blaster, even though he didn't use one in the movies. The sculpting of this weapon does seem to be pretty identical with what was released for those vintage figures. I myself don't have any weapons left from the figures I had as a kid, so I had to look online for some reference photos, and it does, like I said, it seems to be pretty much the same weapon. I think some of those might have had a bluish tint to them, and I think some were all black. But definitely in this case, what you are getting is an all-black weapon. Obviously, no other special painting or anything to it. Sculpting to it, while basic, is still looking pretty good. Like I said, they're just redoing what they did back in the day. There is a touch of texturing on the handle, and that weapon is only going to fit into his right hand since it's more sculpted into that position to hold a weapon. His left hand is just done in a little generic hand open pose, as were the rest of the figures. I will say though, the fit of that weapon into the hand is still a little loose. Doesn't hold it all that snug, but it does stay in there for the most part. So overall for me, like I said, this is a taste of fun here. It might have taken 40 years, but we finally have a Grand Moff Tarkin figure for that vintage line. And I think they did a great job with that figure, especially maintaining the aesthetics of that line, the way things looked. He fits in very well with the other figures from that era, and I'm certainly looking forward to the rest of the figures getting a release. And to be honest, I really wouldn't mind if they went back and did them all. And that wraps up this look at the Retro Collection Grand Moff Tarkin figure. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, not only on the figure, but what do you think about them reissuing these vintage figures back on the shelves again? Granted, they're not doing a whole run, but what was it, 5, 6 figures or something like that. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that. And as always, thank you for watching.